Hello everyone and welcome back to day 8 and session number 18 of the MBA and BGA Business School Leaders Forum, brought to you by GoToWebinar and LogMeIn. For those of you that don't know me, I'm David Woods-Hale, Director of Marketing and Communications at MBA and BGA. And for this double feature presentation, I'm delighted to be joined by Anino Emuwa, Managing Director of Avandis Consulting, who will talk to us about how the MBA and business schools can be a thriving force for diversity and inclusion. Following Anino's presentation, Zita Zulte-Paprika, Vice President of International Relations and Accreditations at Corvinus Business School in Budapest, will share her thoughts on exploring lifelong learning and its impact in today's world. If you haven't joined one of these sessions before, we want your experience to be as interactive as possible, so you can ask questions and put forward comments. Just pop them in the little box in the control panel, and I'll try and get through as many questions as I can with the speakers towards the end of the session. I'll take questions for both our speakers after Zita's presentation. Please also feel free to share your thoughts and musings on the social channel of your choice using the hashtag BSLF. I think I've spoken for long enough. So to take us through the first part of today's presentation, I will now pass over to Anino Emuwa.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anino Emuwa. I'm the founder of Avandis Consulting, which is a strategy and financial advisory firm here in France. I also convene global communities of women in business, and I'm an international public speaker on diversity and inclusion, and I'm delighted to be here with you all today. First of all, I've been privileged to be an entrepreneurship scholar at 4 top business schools in Europe. My MBA was at Cranfield School of Management, and then a doctorate at the Nottingham Business School in Business Administration. At the same time, I was in France at the EM Lyon, which is also a school specializing in entrepreneurship. And finally, now I'm at Cambridge doing a master's in entrepreneurship, where my subject is my subject is about how you can make entrepreneurship thrive. Now, my background has been really fundamental to me understanding that linkage between the business world and business schools. In fact, the reason why I did do my doctorate in the first instance was because I found that as a practitioner in consulting, there were big gaps in knowledge that were not met by the academic world. And so I think that that linkage between the academic world and also the business school is very important. Now, I'd like to start on my presentation, and as follows. The topic we have today is MBAs and business schools, the driving force for diversity and inclusion. If we look a little bit and go back to the history of the MBAs, somewhere in the 20th century, around 1908, started from Harvard Business School. And the reason was that America was industrializing, and it was very important to have management to run those businesses, management training and management leadership. So that linkage between the MBAs and business schools has been right from the very beginning, and it is actually the reasoning behind the business schools. And I think that we have an opportunity now to actually make change and do something better. So the question is, why should we be interested, in any case, in business schools? Well, the presentation here is about how MBAs and business schools can be the driving force for diversity and inclusion. Historically, in any case, that has been the role of business schools to be able to create the managers and leaders for that businesses are required now for over 100 years. And the question is, why should we be interested in diversity in leadership? In fact, it's actually quite interesting because when I was asked to speak at this conference at the beginning of the year, none of us knew 2 things were going to happen. One, that there will be a pandemic declared, and the second thing is that we would have, the anti-racism protests following the killing of George Floyd in the US by the police. Now, those are 2 factors that are really going to affect leadership in the years that are coming, when businesses are trying to cope with the effects of COVID, and also organizations are looking inwards and saying, what can we do in order to improve diversity, especially ethnic diversity? The argument for diversity in leadership has really rested on the business case. And one of the latest reports from McKinsey, which was released right in the heart of the pandemic in May, called Diversity Wins and How Inclusion Matters, actually showed the following data. It showed that the top firms, the top quartile of firms, compared to the bottom quartile of firms, had a performance of well over a 30% difference, and that the most in terms of diversity, and that the most diverse leadership teams had close to a 60% chance of over performance. So there are diversity wins in terms of performance and profitability for firms. This data is known, but yet there's still issues in terms of creating diversity in leadership. Another important report that came out recently, which was in February, which was the Parker Review Committee, which was looking specifically at ethnic diversity and how it enriches business leadership. And the first report that happened a few years before that was consulting for the government and for the private sector. And the purpose of all of this was to say, look, by 2021, we want to have at least one member of an ethnic minority on the top boards in the country. Yes, things have improved since then. When they started, there were 50% of firms, of the FTSE 100 firms, didn't have one single member of an ethnic minority on the board. But in 3 years, there's been an improvement, but that improvement is only 37%. And there's concern that the target of at least one member from an ethnic minority might not happen before the target date of 2021. So certainly there are questions that need to be asked, and how can we facilitate this? From the point of the business school, looking at diversity, and here I'll tend to talk more about ethnic diversity as well as gender diversity, because we have quite a bit of data on that, but diversity covers all kinds of diversity. For business schools, it's an opportunity, I feel. Now is an opportunity in very many ways. One, we find that MBAs are still, CEOs with MBAs represent about 30 to 35% of firms globally. So the MBA is an important tool and a motor to top leadership. 70% of CEOs have advanced degrees, and I'm sure that many business schools will find that there is a little bit of a switch, from MBAs to other degrees, but still the MBA itself is still the most influential degree as far as it concerns, top leadership in advanced degrees. In some industries, for example, in investment banking and management consulting, the MBA is still de rigueur. It is what helps you to migrate, from the lower levels of management into middle levels of management. I was actually a recipient of that as well. I started my career in banking working with Citibank in the corporate bank. And soon after, immediately I graduated from my MBA, all those years ago in the 80s, I got, a big promotion into a job. So the MBA is still a motive for into top leadership. If we look at those are just a couple of the reports that I mentioned, and a bit of the data as well. And if we look at some data on diversity in terms of executive management and boards, because there's a little bit of a difference between the two, and I'll put this funnel up, which you might not see all the detail, but I think the idea is clear. Now, if we start, this is actually by McKinsey & Company in 2018, and if we start from the entry level, and we look at the split between minorities and women. Now, when you look at men and women, at the entry level, it's fairly well balanced. You have 48% of women and 52% of men. Now, when you then look at it in terms of color, you still have quite significant amounts of ethnic minorities or people of color at the entry level. Men of color, 16%, women of color, 17%. So that's still a healthy 32%. By the way, these are global figures. But as we move through the layers from the entry level through to management, senior management, and the upper levels, we see a big difference. And this funnel effect, where organizations are beginning to lose their diversity, both in terms of gender and in terms of ethnic minorities and people of color, is of serious concern. Now, one thing that I think that is important that we need to do, and business schools need to do, is when you're looking at the cohort of students who are coming into the business school. And the question is, what are students' expectations? And there's been a lot of data and a lot of research in terms of from the business school side, but we need better to understand what students' expectations are. Now, the students usually are in mid-management or some level of management when they come to do their MBAs, and they're looking for very often, of course, for the MBAs to steer them and to help them move into higher levels of management. Sometimes, depending on the economic cycle, it can allow you to move into different jobs or different organizations. And also, once the economy slows down a little bit, we tend to find middle managers or junior managers who come for the MBA in order to acquire skills that would allow them, once the economy opens up and their jobs, to enter into good positions. But I think it's important that this data is disaggregated in terms of both gender, in terms of minority, and any other aspects of diversity. It's important because there's clarity that the expectations are not global and they're not the same. So let's look at some data for women post-MBA. Now, this is actually quite interesting. The Financial Times in 2018 had a report called Top MBAs for Women. And what they actually found is that the MBA exaggerated the gender pay gap. That seems strange, and we don't have enough information about why that is so. But what they found is that women's earnings were about 91% of men's before the MBA, and 3 years later, 86%. And we can see that, on the graph we have there on the right. Whilst women's salaries are increasing, but they are not increasing at the same, according to this survey, they were not increasing at the same pace as men's, and therefore there's a gap. This is where business schools can also be very useful in understanding what exactly is happening and why is this the case. Another piece of data which is also interesting, disaggregated data that the Financial Times did, was looking at the rankings for top MBAs for women in 2018. Now, as we know, these kinds of rankings are really influential in students picking different schools. When that data is looked at in terms of women, now on the left, you can see the ranks 1 to 10. And out of those 10 schools, we see, interestingly, several schools from Asia. We have 3 from China. Number 1 is the Shangjiao Tong University in China. We also have the University of Hong Kong. We have the Renmin, and we have Nanyang from Singapore. And then we have all the US universities as well. And sadly, there aren't any European universities in the top 10. And that is from the point of view of the salaries 3 years after finishing the MBAs. But if we look on the extreme right, we then see what the full-time MBA rank is. That is ranking by all students, and it's a complete mishmash. The first ranked for women is actually the 34th. Stanford is actually number 1. Okay, that's not bad. We have Washington Olin, which is number 50 on the FTA rank. However, it's number 4 in terms of outcomes in income for women 3 years after. So it's clear that we need to have this kind of data to understand what is happening. In the case of Olin, actually, it's quite interesting because they set out specifically in order to recruit and have programs for women. So one has to be intentional for these things to happen. Going on to this next slide. What are some of the things that can be done? Well, in terms of the path to gender balance and ethnic diversity, The first thing is data. Data is always important. Data and transparency is always critical and important, and that is for universities and for business schools as well as for organizations. And this is where business schools can also help with organizations in getting some of that data. A lot of data we have about business schools and about outcomes, but very often we don't have that level of disaggregation. Okay. In terms of women, universities that tend to have specific programs, or not necessarily programs, but at least specific initiatives targeted at women's leadership also do well. And women's leadership could be critically important, and also organizations as well. For organizations, the practices in diversity and inclusion are critical and important. There's also the role we know in terms of government, in terms of policy when it comes to women childbirth. Taxes can be very helpful. We have then we look at external institutions to this issue, and we have institutions that advocate for increased diversity. So, for example, we have the 30% Women Club, we have the Parker Review, for example. So we have institutions that do look at diversity. We have consultancy companies. We just looked at the report from McKinsey, which has become quite an influential one in terms of gender diversity in leadership. And we have the role in red of the business schools as well, in terms of two things. One, in terms of the leadership training through the MBAs and other programs in the business schools, and two, in the research in gathering the right kind of data so people can make decisions. Let's look a little bit closely at the kinds of things that the kinds of things that business schools can do. The first thing is recruitment. What are successful business schools doing in order to recruit a diverse student body in terms of both ethnic and gender diversity? They're doing something right. What are they doing? Incidentally, the good news is that women's enrollment in MBAs is increasing over the years. Mainstreaming diversity and inclusion, and by that I mean very often diversity and inclusion is looked at as if it's an issue for the group that is not well represented. So if it's to do with women, or if it's to do with the ethnic minorities, but these conversations need to be mainstreamed into the discussion. And here I think that business schools do have, quite an important role, in as much as business schools have been very influential in terms of driving leadership practices. This is one way that business schools could also have impact. When we talk about inclusion, we've talked about diversity, we need to talk about inclusion. And inclusion is not so much the teaching of it, but in terms of practice. How can business schools within their programs become more inclusive? One thing that I think is important in the academic area, academic field, is that of inclusion in terms of faculty and diversity in faculty. That is where universities and faculty and institutions are not doing very well in terms of the percentage of women, for example, and also ethnic minorities. So there's a role there. Women's leadership, we mentioned that a little bit. And then one thing that with my work for women that we've seen is that encouraging strong networks with women and having women role models come in to speak, mentor, and sponsor women on the program could be very helpful. Examining the curriculum, looking at the curriculum, how far has it changed from the early days, and how can the curriculum be amended in order to encourage leaders to think more about and practice diversity and inclusion, and of course management research, which we've talked about. So I'll close just to say the following. Well, I think we might have, some of us might have noticed that Domino's Pizza and Aston Martin just in the last few weeks now have all male boards, which is a bit disappointing. So you have, some disappointing news. But the positives are that, there are opportunities that business schools can grab and become influential and impactful in terms of driving leadership changes, and also in attracting diverse student membership. There's a record number of women in MBAs approaching 40%. That needs to continue, and that's excellent. And the trends post-COVID-19, I know that some other speakers will be talking about issues such as digitalization, etc. But once we have a time like this where we have the awareness about the importance of racial diversity, about gender diversity, it's a time that institutions can look at and recreate and present programs and content that is suitable and that can drive the growth of diversity as business leaders, potential future business leaders, leave MBAs and going back into their place of work. So on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Anino. That was a fantastic presentation. Lots of really interesting insight there, and there's been a lot of questions coming through, so we'll be sure to get to those at the end. I'm just going to set Zita up now for her presentation.
Okay, I'm here. Welcome, everyone. I try to open my presentation. I wonder whether you can see it.
Absolutely, Zita. All good.
Perfect. Sorry about the problems during the previous session. It was a great presentation. Congratulations. Let me start with a very short introduction of myself. For 6 years, I was the Dean of Corvinus Business School, and I was just appointed in my new position. Now I'm, as you can read, the VP of International Relations and Accreditations at Corvinus. And today I want to share our experiences regarding the lifelong learning experiences at Corvinus. But let me start with few facts about Corvinus. Actually, let me mention that we were so excited because the annual conference of AMBA is supposed to be organized in Budapest this year. And we are so disappointed that you couldn't come and meet us here in Budapest. But hopefully next year we can welcome all of you. And you will see this fantastic view of our university. We are located just next to the River Danube, which is not blue, unfortunately, but still beautiful. I would say a middle-sized university according to the Hungarian standards, with 12,000 students, less than 500 faculty members. We teach on each level from bachelor to PhD. We speak a very strange language, Hungarian, so we have to teach also in English and German because international students unfortunately do not speak Hungarian. The ratio of international students is around 15% currently. While we cover 3 disciplines: business and management, economics, and social sciences. And if you want to know what makes Corvinus different from other business schools, I can show you our vision and mission. Nothing surprising in them except our location. We are in Central and Eastern Europe. So obviously we aim to educate and train the elite of the region and Hungary, of course. What is also interesting that until last year, July 1st, we were a public university, and I might say that we are a kind of pilot in the Hungarian educational system, because from last year we are a public interest, private, non-profit higher educational institution, and we also changed our structure. Previously, we had 3 schools and faculties. Corvinus Business School was one of these 3 faculties, the largest one. And from 1st of January, we changed to a much seamless, flat, agile matrix structure. And to be honest, we just learned how to run this new structure, but we hope that we were quite successful previously, but we hope that in the future, this structure will support our effort even in a more efficient way. And now let me turn to my topic today. Today, I want to talk about the lifelong learners and lifelong learning experiences at my university. This is a very interesting market, actually, because students in this segment are quite different from the so-called regular bachelor or even master students, because they choose to study voluntarily. They are very motivated. They do not like the strict structures. They really learn from each other as well, and they are much more motivated. At least that's our experience, and that's my personal experience as well. And to be honest, our professors really prefer to teach in our postgraduate and MBA programs much more than in a regular basic level class at the bachelor level. So how do we define this portfolio? First of all, I think a university is the proper place, a kind of natural hub to offer lifelong learning programs and to establish the whole lifelong learning system. Why? Because this market is huge. The basic reasons are that people live longer, luckily, and what is even more important, people change their profession much more frequently than in the past, and therefore there is a high demand for upgrading, extending knowledge, and the best solution for that obviously is to attend a kind of postgraduate or MBA program. The needs and expectations, however, are quite high in this segment. While most of the students are seeking not only the knowledge, but the degree as well, but there are others who do not care of the degree. They simply want to refresh their knowledge in a certain area. You know, they really require a high level of flexibility in the delivery mode, because some of them is willing to attend classes in late afternoons or even on Saturday or Friday night. But others prefer to have a very short, intense course just for 5 days or maximum 6 days. So we really should react and should offer different kinds of programs. I will show you later on what do we have. And obviously, once someone is attending such a program, they seek for a measurable result, which is typically a degree or a knowledge which could be applied immediately in their position, in their job. Well, we really offer a great variety of programs, from master's programs, evening classes, corresponding courses, short courses, different specialized programs, MBAs or EMBAs. We made a survey, and I want to share with you the results of this survey because I think the results are quite interesting and give a kind of explanation why these lifelong learners decide to sit in these courses again after graduation. You know, as I said, it's quite tiring during the evenings, during the weekends, and the reasons are the following. First of all, there is a quite big group of students who hold a quite different degree, like medical doctors, lawyers, engineers, pharmacists, and they decided to start their own business, or they are promoted as the director of a hospital, for example, and they understand that they badly need some business knowledge or management knowledge. The other segment is the group of those who originally hold a business degree. However, they want to become experts in a certain field because during their career, they just landed in a position where they badly need a very deep knowledge of the field. In Hungary, in certain positions, they require a certain degree. Master is used to be the minimum, but in higher level position, they might require an MBA. So another quite trivial motivation is when someone want to be promoted, well, there is no other choice just to obtain the degree, just to work for a degree. And the last group, I think the most interesting one and exciting one, those who simply just want to expand their knowledge because they have big plans, they want to change even the world. So they are very, very, very motivated to acquire more knowledge. And this is what we offer. Here you can see, I would say that's the kind of menu for the lifelong learners in these 4 segments. So for future business persons, we organize a special postgraduate program. And also we open for them our MBA. We have a quite wide portfolio for experts, and because I suppose not everyone can read these smaller letters, let me just pick up a few examples. We run a program in supply chain management, lean management, procurement, public procurement, international distribution, cultural tourism, energy management, leadership and communication, and so on and so on. And all these programs conclude to a degree. For leaders, we offer a kind of MBA-like programs, like in agribusiness management, IT, for IT managers, a special program, and also we have a special program for HR business partners. And for those who really want to change the world, we always offer the most latest and advanced and hot topics like design communication, fintech, and many others. By the way, in this last segment, we are quite lucky because the Hungarian accreditation process is quite complicated. However, in this kind of segment, we should submit all the materials, background materials, curriculum, and permissions and everything. But here, the process is quite quick, because the accreditation agency understood that with these programs, we really want to react on the need of the market. Okay, sorry, I made a mistake. I should do something. Sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know how to correct it.
Just try moving to the next slide, Zita. If you just press the arrow at the bottom, it should just move forward.
Yeah, but I can't. Sorry. Oh. Oh my gosh.
Try escape and then just open the presentation again.
Escape, yes. Okay, now it will work. Yes. The next slide is really exciting because it is from the university's perspective and it shows our challenges. I'm honest, we have a relatively high dropout rate in these programs. So for us, it's a quite unpredictable market, and I think you can find out the reasons. In most of the cases, family reasons, financial reasons, problems in the workplace, moving from one city to another. So typical reasons, you know, can't be predicted, and we really very sorry when we lose a student, but we fully understand that this is the specialty of the market. We know that there is a very intensive competition, especially in the field of MBAs. That's a given. And we also know that especially MBA teaching requires a special effort from the faculty, which means that obviously the costs are much higher there. I mean, from the university perspective again. But obviously we try to overcome these difficulties, and we try to find solution how to run this portfolio in an efficient way. And one of the solutions is quite obvious, because when we recruit students, we can rely on our alumni. And that's why we always try to build up a strong alumni network. And once we have the alumni, we try to cultivate them, as Americans used to say that. And here you can see some techniques we use during cultivating the alumni. We really prefer to involve them in other activities, mentoring bachelor and master students. We involve them in business projects, again for bachelor and master students. They are quite active in thesis consultation. We invite them to participate in the jury of case study competitions. They love to lecture. And for each program, we have a so-called program development committee, and we invite an alumni to participate and to contribute in these committees. Unfortunately, donation is not widely spread in Hungary. We do not have real culture of donating, but using the previous techniques, alumni can really give back, and time to time we provide presentations and lectures. We invite famous alumni persons to share their experiences, and these lectures used to be quite popular. However, this is a demanding market, as I've mentioned, and here you can see some challenges, and I don't want to list all of them. Just let me point on the flexible delivery as a challenge, because we know that people who are working, they really want to have work-life balance. So obviously they should have time for their families as well. So they really want to optimize their time. That's why we think that in the future, the role of the hybrid techniques will be growing. I mean that we will have more blended learning. We learned, you know, it was a very valuable experience and challenge for us, that because of the pandemic, in a week we should fully change to online teaching. And actually this last slide shows what we did. We really sent all international students back home, and we called all Corvinus students back to Corvinus. We were working in home office, and the university was totally closed. only employees could enter. And we use these two platforms, Moodle and Microsoft Teams, for online teaching. And obviously, we were teaching MBA courses also on Microsoft Teams. And what was very, very interesting for us, and we even had a kind of coffee discussion over this topic, MBA students really were very active, and they insisted on contacting each other and their instructors as well, and they initiated extra meetings just to be connected. So if you will check this presentation, I just incorporated a short video about the university so you can have a feeling about Corvinus, and I hope that I could show you what we are doing in lifelong learning programs at Corvinus. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zita. Thank you for that. I'm just going to bring Anino back online. Hi, Anino, are you there? Lovely, brilliant.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Thank you both very much for two excellent presentations. We've had loads of questions come in, so I'm just going to start going through those now. The first question we've had is one for you, Zita. They're asking if do you think that COVID-19 will have an impact on the demand for lifelong learning as managers gear up to face the new normal in business?
Well, I think so. As I said, you know, while we are witnessing that people change their profession much more frequently. And I think that because of the crisis, probably quite many of the current employees will change their mind and they might start new businesses, for example. And you know, sooner or later they would need some business knowledge. So I think yes, but as I said, the format will change, I think. So I think this face-to-face teaching probably will be less, especially in this segment. So we are preparing to a new era as well, not only the students, but we instructors also preparing for the fall in a different way. So I think we will have much more online content available. But to be honest, we still insist on the face-to-face connection to our students. So we try to keep that.
Lovely, thank you very much. Anino, this is one for you.
Sure.
In light of the research that you shared during your presentation, yes, do you think that there should be different rankings in place for women to help them decide where they would like to do their MBAs?
Well, absolutely. I think the more information that you can provide, you know, the better. And one thing that we've seen about with rankings in any case is that, you know, it does allow business schools to be more responsive. So I think, you know, yes, the ranking, it's a pity that the FT1 was only seemed to have run for 2018, but I think they're helpful.
Lovely, thank you very much. And then staying with you, Anino, somebody else has asked, often when reporting on diversity statistics, organizations don't take the glass ceiling into consideration. Do you think that the same is true for business schools? And if so, how can we overcome this in our reporting of diversity initiatives, I suppose, for business schools?
Well, I think the thing is that information or other data needs to be as granular as possible. I think what we saw with the McKinsey one was because they gave the data, you know, at all levels, that really helped. Because once you start seeing what is happening at different levels, you know, so you disaggregate your data in terms of, you know, the types of faculty, the kinds of subjects, for example, you know, full-time, part-time, and all of that. The more data you have, the more it is you can use it as a tool to make change, and people become more aware. It's you know, when you know what you're facing, it's you know, it's easier to start to do something. Very difficult without the data.
Thank you very much. Another question for you, Zita.
Yes.
It's another one about rankings. So somebody's asking, how should lifelong learning initiatives offered by business schools be factored into business school rankings, in your opinion, given that the current measures are very heavily focused on graduate salaries as opposed to some of the other factors that you discussed in your presentation?
Well, you know, this is a very interesting question, especially to me, because, you know, we are struggling with that column of the questionnaires, especially when you are filling the FT ranking tables, because in our region, you know, the salaries are much lower. And we are attracting, especially for our EMBA and MBA students as well, students from the region. So I think we are not competitive regarding that criterion. However, I can tell you another aspect where we are very competitive, and that's the value for money, because not only the salaries are lower, but the tuition fees are lower. So I think that's a competitive advantage of our programs, that the tuition is lower. However, typically for those who will work in the region after graduation or after getting the MBA degree, unfortunately, they still can earn less than in the other parts of the world. But I think this is a strong, well, you know, I graduated as a mathematician, so I have my strong own opinion about that question. I think those who are working on these rankings, they should figure out how to adjust, you know, these discrepancies. So it's not a very complex methodological issue. So I think they should devote more attention to this question. But I think it was a very good question.
Very true. Thank you very much. Anino, another one for you, a challenging one. What advice would you give to a woman just about to start off in her MBA journey?
Okay, well, it's two things. It's whether or not she's actually chosen, or if she's looking to choose. The thing is, I think that as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the data is not so clear, it's not so transparent. But I think that you have to be thinking ahead. And it's what do you want to get out of this, and where do you want to go, and what's the reasoning behind doing the MBA? And gone are the years where when you do an MBA and you literally sit in the class and you know the program sort of takes over. You have to be intentional. And I think that business schools actually these days are really very good in terms of working with industry as well. So I'd like to say is, if you've already chosen, well, first of all, be clear about what it is where you want to go to, and then choose accordingly. All MBAs our schools are different. Be involved in the business side of activities as well. Then you can actually get quite a bit of visibility, because one thing that we talk about in looking at women in leadership is lack of visibility. And it's not very surprising if there are not very many women in leadership. The few, I mean, you don't get to see them anyway. So use that as a way to be visible and engage with the business, with businesses through the business school as well. So those are the kinds of things that I would say. And I think that the challenge is always for women. It's always a little bit more difficult, and therefore start looking at the next steps. Are you going to be looking for a new job, or are you going back to the same organization? And if you're going back to the same organization, I'd say have that conversation before you leave. That what is the path of progress? After you leave the MBA and go back to work. So I think I just say overall be intentional, and it's not just an opportunity to study and to gather skills. It's an opportunity to actually to engage with the business sector and grow your contacts and your networks in a sort of very sort of safe environment.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. I think this is a question for both of you. So I'll come to you first with it, Zita. Do you think there is conflict between business schools producing graduates who are ethical, sustainable, and diverse leaders, and producing graduates that fulfill the needs of today's top employers? Do you think there's a conflict, or do you think these goals are fundamentally aligned? So can I come to you first to answer that one, Zita, and then we'll come to you, Anino.
Sure. I think that's a very good question. You know, I mentioned that I was dean for 6 years, and I had a very strong corporate advisory board, and we discussed this issue several times, and we always concluded that we should listen to each other. And also, I always felt that, sorry to say that, but in certain cases, we have to educate business as well, in general, business leaders as general. Especially, you know, that we try to share with them our knowledge we gain through different networks like EFMD, ACSB, AMBA, Prime, and other. We are members in all these organizations, and we contribute a lot. We also have received the BSIS label. And, you know, based on all our experiences, we always try to convince our business partners that they really should be also require the ethical behavior from our students, the responsibility, but we always explain that it's true that they should behave on the same way because the graduates will follow their practice. So I think in this respect, business schools really have a responsibility to educate responsible future leaders, and we should do it together with practice.
Well, that is a nice sort of ending, and I'd like to actually, take over from there, Zita, which is exactly that. The role of the MBA is to educate leaders for the future. Even though, of course, for the MBA student, the first thing you're looking for is for a job. But, we know how influential MBAs have been in terms of determining how businesses look at, performance and all of that. So I think it's an opportunity. I think what the world is seeing, and there is a crisis in leadership. Sometimes change is very difficult to happen, but we're seeing that, ESG is not just one thing. At the World Economic Forum in January, what was being spoken about was, this whole concept of stakeholder capitalism, which is not anything new, but it is new in the sense that, taking it away from from academia into the mouths of leaders. And there's consciousness that when we talk about impact economy and all of that, that these aren't just things on the margin, that, we need to be socially responsible, we need to be ethical. We can even look at the crisis in political leadership to be as a consequence, of the problems we've had in terms of the standard capitalism model. So, the MBA is creating leaders for the future. I think there's going to be convergence. There is convergence, at the margins, but, I feel that it will deepen, even with COVID, post-COVID. There's a more awareness in terms of, what are our values really as, in the business sector as leaders.
Lovely, thank you very much. Excellent answers to that question. I'm really sorry, everyone, but I think that's all we've got time for. So all that remains to be said for my part is, Anino and Zita, thank you both for excellent sessions, lots of insight, lots of practical advice, lots of great research and lots of great things going on. And it's really exciting from our perspective to see the work that you're doing and taking this forward in the wider market. So it's been a pleasure to have you speak at the conference today. So thank you both very, very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Great to meet you. And thank you to our listeners.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you both. So later today at 3:30 p.m. BST, we'll be looking at tips and tricks for running successful training sessions in digital platforms with Ashley McMahon, Talent Development Manager, and Joseph Walsh, Global Product Specialist at GoToWebinar by LogMeIn. Then tomorrow we're back at 9:30 a.m. with Rob Lowe from McGraw-Hill and George Hulen, who's the Associate Head of the School of Economics at Coventry University, who will be sharing their insight on setting students up for success in an online and hybrid world. If you've registered for these sessions, you should have received an email notifying you of how to join. Otherwise, I've put the links to register in the chat box. Just before I go, if you've missed any sessions, we've put the recordings of all those that have taken place on our website for you, and I've pasted the link in the chat room so as you can find it and access the content. We will be making the attendee list for all the sessions available on our website. For security reasons, I've pasted the password for the delegate list for this session in the chat box. And we also, as I mentioned earlier, recommend that you follow the hashtag BSLF and social media channels of your choice, comment on posts, share your learnings, and have a good old socially distanced conversation online. Thank you once again to our speakers this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing everyone else, hopefully later on today, in another session at the forum. Thanks and goodbye.